I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to the Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who've made radical changes in their lives for something more important. Today, I'm joined by Debra Jason, and she has an awesome story to tell us. So without further ado, Debra, please tell us your story.
Hi there, Shay, and thank you everyone for tuning in. My story, well, it goes kind of back a few years because, like many people, I was brought up to think I should go to college, that I should study something. And so I did. I spent 6 years between an undergraduate and a graduate degree studying to become a speech therapist.
Oh, okay.
And I did that. My undergraduate degree was back in New York, which is where I was born and raised. And I moved to Colorado in 1976 to get my master's in communication disorders. So I did that and went off, and luckily for me, got a job right away. And after practicing for several years, my last job in that field was as a speech therapist in the public schools in Adams County District 14 here in Colorado. And I had 4 schools that I had to travel to, and I had to be in each school twice a week. Well, there's 5 days in a week, 4 schools times 2, that's 8. So after doing that for a few years, I got a little bit burned out. The kids I worked with were great, but the administration was not as good. And luckily, I guess for me, I had a boss who was very understanding, and one day looked at me and said, "You don't look happy. What's going on?" So here I'd studied for 6 years to do this and went, I'm not happy. What am I going to do? Luckily, having worked in the schools, I was able to resign at the end of May, but still get paid through August.
Nice.
So that gave me the opportunity to, if anyone's familiar, it was very popular back then. I don't know if people still read it, but there's What Color is Your Parachute?
Oh, sure.
Which is a book about, career transition. And I said, okay, I didn't look for a job. I started to practice what was in the book and do the exercises in the book. And went on several information interviews, which is what the book talks about, in fields that I thought I was interested in. And I actually did, after several months, come up with a new career. And it's actually still quite different from what I'm doing today. But then I went into the wholesale end of the clothing business.
Oh.
And so I sold junior women's sportswear, which was great because I love clothes. I got clothes at a good savings. But I had a boss who was a great person as a friend, but he wasn't a great person as a boss.
Oh.
And so one day when my check went to taking care of some of his habits, it was time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
So I then moved on to the catalog industry, mail order. Long before the internet, there was something called a catalog, a print publication.
Yeah.
So you can see at this point, 6 years of school had nothing to do with what I was doing, other than it was communication oriented. And so I went to work for this catalog company in Boulder, Colorado, working start to finish basically on producing the catalog, going to trade shows and looking for products and working with graphic designers and working with copywriters. And all this back then was done quite differently than it is today with all the technology. But again, my passion wasn't quite being fueled, and I'm not sure I even knew at that point what my passion was. And so one day I went to my boss and I said, I'll keep doing what I'm doing, but I want to do something creative. Now, I know, even though I went to college, when I started college, I was a fine arts major. But I'm not a fine artist, and I'm not a graphic designer. So I said to my boss, how about if I write? We'll save money on a copywriter, and if you like what I do, I'll keep doing it. And if you don't, we'll go back to hiring a copywriter. So that's where I started to write copy. And as fate would have it, things changed with that company, and I got offered a position back in New York.
Hmm.
So I went back to New York, and I love New York City. It's a great place to grow up. It's a great place to visit. But guess what? I didn't want to live there anymore. Anyone who knows about Colorado knows we have a lot of sunshine and blue skies. And bless my father's heart. My father looked at me one day when I was still back in New York, and he said, "You don't seem happy here. Why don't you leave?" So I came back to Colorado. And talking about, shifts in one's life, when I returned to Colorado, even though I had lived here for many years, it was still a big change. And I was without a job at that point.
Oh.
And I had a mortgage to pay because I had a condominium here in Boulder that I had bought. And so I went looking for a job. Now, this was in 1988, and Colorado was in a recession.
Yep.
So you can probably fill in the blanks there and figure out that everywhere I went looking for a job, people said, "Debra, we're not hiring. Debra, we're laying people off. But Debra, if you were to start your own business as a freelancer, we could use your services."
Hmm.
So I don't know how many people who are watching may have thought, I always wanted my own business, but I don't know what it's going to be. Or I always wanted my own business, but I never studied anything in particular in college. Well, I didn't study writing. I didn't study copywriting. I didn't study English literature. I didn't study journalism. I just knew I wanted to be a copywriter. And when all these people said to me, "If you start your own business, we could use your services," the light bulb went off in my head. I said, well, I always wanted to start my own business. I never knew what that was going to be. I guess I'm going to start my business as a copywriter.
Sure.
So January 1st, 1989, I opened my doors as The Right Direction, and that's spelled WRITE, because I'm a copywriter. So that might have been sort of the long journey, but it's definitely, as you and I were talking before we started to record, my parents were actually, I should go back a little bit. Probably what my mother wanted most for me when I was younger was to get married and have a family.
Oh.
My dad, well, he might have wanted that too, also was a big believer that an education is really important. And so I went to college, I had a major, but what I'm doing today is definitely quite different than what I studied when I went to university. And so if you're good at math, you'll know that it's almost 30 years since I started my business. And it's, if you had asked me when I was a kid, what do I want to be when I grow up? I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a model. Copywriter wasn't on my list.
Sure.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, my entire childhood until I was 18 years old, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So
Okay. Did you ever pursue it?
I did up until I was in ROTC when I discovered I have an extra lumbar vertebrae, and that door was closed.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah, it was
Well,
I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I want to do.
well, today, in addition to being a copywriter, I'm also a speaker, which is, I think, how we connected.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the presentations I do, I ask people the question I just asked you, which is, what did you want to be when you grew up? And some people wanted to be astronauts or, firefighters, and some of them are doing that. And some of them are doing kind of what I say I'm doing. I wanted to be an actress and a model, so no, I'm not quite doing that, but I'm still doing something somewhat related. When I speak, there aren't cameras rolling and doing takes, but I'm up there sharing value with people and sharing information with audiences in a different way maybe than an actress might, but it sort of fulfills that childhood dream. It just looks a little different.
Yeah, very cool. That's very cool. So as you went through that process of working in the school district, which is a very cool thing to be doing, where you're
Mhm.
actually working with kids and, you're getting to see that progress of, kids actually getting better with speech, if that's what you were
Mhm.
specialized in. Um, as you began to think about walking away, was there something inside of you yelling, no, you got to stay and keep this job
Oh,
that you trained for?
well, there was a couple of things that happened then, which is probably why I had this, I had an amazing boss who sort of picked up on that. And probably what he picked up on was the fact that I had been thinking about it for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but what was going on in my head, kind of what you're referring to, is I kept saying, I studied for this for 6 years.
Right.
How could I give this up? The other side of the coin was I was working in the school system where you got holidays off and summers off and,
Right.
vacations. And not just me, but my dad, when I told him I wasn't, happy and I might leave, said, how could you give that up? you
Mm-hmm.
know I don't understand, how could you give up summers off and all that. And so that did play through my mind for quite some time. But the clincher was, one, when my boss said something to me, but also I broke out in what we think probably was hives. And so my body was saying something's not right.
Yeah.
So my theory is, when your body shows you some dis-ease, it's telling you something. And so, yes, it took me a while till I finally cut the cord and said, okay, I'm going to quit. The other thing, as we've said, is I didn't know what I was going to do next. I just spent 6 years studying for this.
Right.
So now what do you do?
Right.
So it's frightening.
Yeah, no, I'm certain that it was. So what did it feel like then, as you accepted the fact that you needed to do something else and you saw the potential next thing? What was going on inside of you as you looked out and said, wow, I can walk away from here and I can go over there?
I don't know if it was that clear. So I was able to walk away. Part of what made it easier to walk away, as I mentioned earlier, was that I was able to resign in May, but still have 3 months of income.
Right.
And so it was a conscious effort on my part to go, okay, I've got 3 months to explore what that next step is, because I really didn't know. It's like, okay, I'm a speech pathologist, but now what am I going to do? And, I had friends who had gone to graduate school with me, who said, well, instead of the public schools, go work in a hospital. And I was like, nope, I just want out. So that's when What Color Is Your Parachute came in handy,
Mm-hmm.
because I really didn't know. And in doing some of the exercises, 3 things came up that I remember. One was I was interested in the entertainment business. And back then, the space that is now the Fillmore, I believe, in Denver, at that point in time, we're talking many years ago, it was something called Mammoth Gardens, and they were just considering turning it into an entertainment space. And I had long conversations with the gentleman who was involved with it, but they didn't have money yet. So that was one area. The next area was TV, but I didn't want to be an actress, and I didn't want to be a news reporter. I wanted to be like a talk show host. And I was pretty brave back then. I don't know if I would do this today, but I just picked up the phone, because it was before email, it was before text.
Right.
I picked up a phone and called the channel. It might have been Channel 4 here in Denver, and talked to the woman who at that time was the morning show host. And she met with me and we chatted about it. And again, for those of you who are listening, I wasn't asking them for a job. I was just asking them to meet with me and tell me about their job and about their industry, to see if it was something I wanted to pursue.
Sure.
So, and I met someone who was a sales rep for a clothing line, and we had a conversation. So as I did all those 3 things, one of them, actually, two of them did offer me jobs. The gentleman I spoke to in the entertainment field, but his caveat was right now he didn't have any funding. So he's like, I can't offer you a job until we have some money. So I'm like, okay, well, that's not going to work. The woman at the TV station, she couldn't offer me a job, but it was good to speak to her. And then the gentleman in the clothing industry offered me a job. So that was kind of the transition. It wasn't that I quit going, okay, I'm going to quit this to go do that. I really didn't know what I was going to do. That's how I ended up in the wholesale end of the clothing business.
So what?
Whoops, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So what did it feel like when you quit? Even though you had a parachute, maybe you hadn't found the book yet, but what did it feel like knowing you've got 3 months and you don't know where you're going?
I guess, the closest thing to what it felt like was trepidation. Even with that little cushion, I think I probably took some time off, maybe a week or 2 weeks because it was summer. But then it was like, well, now you have this project, I guess is the best way to call it, to figure out what's next. And so there was fear in that, because just because I had that 3-month cushion didn't mean it was going to take me 3 months. It could have taken 6 months. It could have taken a year in terms of finding the right fit. And if I look back, I'm not sure exactly how many months it did take in the long run. But, for me, when there's change, it's very scary. Even though there's, go out of your comfort zone, the best success comes out of your comfort zone. It's not comfortable, and you start to have fears and doubts, and did I make the right decision? But I'm here to share the story. So something went right. Something was okay. But you never know what path life is going to take you on. I think it's always kind of a surprise. Like I said, even though I studied for 6 years to go down this path, something shifted and I ended up down another. And it shifted more than once, obviously.
Right. So once you made the decision and said, okay, I'm resigning as a teacher to start with here, you told your family.
Mm-hmm.
How did they react after the act of you quitting and saying, I'm changing?
What are you going to do? I don't know. And actually, I'll say this about my dad, who didn't understand quite so much how I would give up something just because I wasn't happy. His generation was, you get a job, you do it, you take care of your family. I didn't have a family in terms of I didn't have children or anything like that. But to his, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm a word person, but I'm losing the word right now. But even though he didn't understand why I was quitting, he said to me, because I felt bad. When I went to undergraduate school, I went to a city university, so it didn't cost a lot of money. When I came to Colorado for graduate school, then luckily my parents were able to take care of that for me. And so I felt bad about that. Sure. So I said that to my dad, I feel bad. I spent 6 years in school. And he said to me, your education is never wasted. So I felt really blessed, that he wasn't saying to me, oh yeah, I just put you through school and now you're not even going to do it. He didn't understand why I would leave, as I mentioned earlier, because of all the benefits of working in the schools. But he also reassured me that my education was still valuable, even though I was shifting direction. And years later, when I was in that position at working in the merchandise mart for a clothing rep, and my boss, as I mentioned, was a good person as a friend, but not a great boss. My father said to me, I think you should leave, which is a big thing for my father.
Right.
Because his attitude is you keep working. And even when I moved back to New York and I wasn't happy, it was my dad who said, maybe you should go back. So I think he learned over time, that I was okay, that I could bounce back on my feet, even
Nice.
when I didn't know what was going to happen next.
Sure.
So my parents, I was blessed. My parents were understanding in that they gave me the space to do that. They may not have totally understood why I was doing it, but they were supportive. So I was really fortunate to have two parents that understood that, okay, you want to go for it, go ahead. And they weren't sending me money, they were just sending me love and support. So I knock on wood, because I feel like, and they were actually two good role models for me for being entrepreneurs and starting your own business.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So as you went through this
My
first,
mom,
sorry, go ahead.
oh, you kind of froze up there for a bit.
Oh yeah, connection
Um,
spotty.
my mom had started her own business with some girlfriends. They started a real estate agency many years ago. And my dad started his own business as a certified public accountant. So, I had two role models that showed me, you can do that if you want. I didn't follow the same career paths they did. I would never want to be a CPA. And I did sell real estate, but I never started my own real estate firm.
So as you went through that process with what color is your parachute? Obviously, one of the big lessons you learned out of that was to talk to people and to go out and find out what people are doing in areas that you're interested. What else changed inside of you, or what kind of lessons did you learn going through that process of discovering who you were and what you wanted to do?
One of the biggest lessons probably is that I didn't necessarily need a college education
Right.
to go do something else. And I learned that lesson as well from my mother, because in addition to, she wanted to sell real estate, she went and she got her license. She wanted to become a travel agent. She had no background. She just knocked on some doors and said, would you train me? And somebody said yes. So I started looking at things and going, okay, what do I want to do? Do I need a college degree in this field to do it? Or do I just need the desire? And so that was a big lesson, especially when I started my own business. Because, as I mentioned, I don't have a degree in journalism or in writing or in English literature, but I did have the desire. And I think that's really important for everyone who's listening, that if there's something that you want to do and you think, oh, I don't have a college degree, and maybe, it's changed somewhat for some industries or some fields where you might be told, yes, you have to have a master's to do this, but if I feel fairly strongly that if you have a desire, you can sort of find the way to make it work. Or if you don't find the way, you can find mentors or people who will help guide you along the path so that you can get to where you want to be.
Sure.
So I'm always very encouraging to people who say, well, I want to do that, but I'm like, but what? Well, I don't have a degree. Well, that's okay. Or for some cases it may not be a degree, but you might need a skill. If you're going to operate a drill saw or machinery, but again, you can find someone to teach you.
Certainly. So
So,
as you went down the
yeah.
path and started your own business, what was your biggest fear in making that leap to start your own business?
Oh God, getting business. um, just because you open your doors and say, hi, I'm here, doesn't mean people start banging on your door. So I really had to learn how to market my business, how to get exposure for my business. And I decided one thing was I was going to join two organizations. I picked one that was in my community and one that was in my industry. And I actually write about this in my book. I'm the author of a book called Millionaire Marketing on a Shoestring Budget.
Nice.
And here it is. This book is basically based on my experience of what was it like to open your doors for business and then go, okay, now what? You have to go out. You have to go out and get your message out there. You have to get exposure. And you have to, really important, and I speak about this a lot, you have to build and nurture relationships. And more so in today's world with all our technology and with social media and iPhones and iPads, and it's easy to forget that, in the sense of you connect with someone on Facebook or on LinkedIn and think, okay, we're connected now. Now I can start to pitch you.
Yeah.
Now I can start to sell whatever it is I have to sell. And a lot of the times when I did pitch, build and nurture a relationship first. Because when you build that, what I call the KLT factor, which you may have heard is the know, like, and trust, when you build that, then the relationship starts to grow. And so for me, starting my business, one of my biggest fears was paying my bills, because I had a mortgage to pay. And so if I wasn't getting any clients, I needed to still pay those bills. And I tell people this a lot. I worked a part-time job, and I've done that actually on and off throughout my career. But initially I worked the part-time job because it helped me keep my business open. At first I'd get embarrassed if somebody saw me working somewhere, and they go, oh, are you not doing your business anymore? I'm like, no, I'm doing this because it helps me keep my doors open. So it probably was 3 years maybe before it felt like my business was real, meaning I had clients and I didn't have to worry about having another job, and it was flowing. And I went, okay. And that was my first goal, was to make it through 3 years. And of course, I don't know if you've heard this saying, but after I made it through 3 years, people said to me, well, really it's 5 years. You've got to make it through 5 years. And so, knock on wood, it's now 29 and a half years. So I'm proud to say I'm still here.
So 29 years in one business is impressive nowadays, without a doubt. What are the biggest lessons you've learned?
Well, I'm sorry, I missed the end of that. What were the biggest lessons I learned?
Running your company for the last 29 years.
Oh, running my business. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone, especially these days, because most people aren't picking up the phone, so it's a pleasant surprise. Don't be afraid to write a handwritten note, because more and more these days people are emailing and texting, but a handwritten note is just a small thing that goes a long way. And another small thing that has a big impact is saying thank you, is to be grateful for business that comes your way, for support that other people give you, for mentors, for colleagues who refer you. So that's probably the important part of building and nurturing relationships, is not forgetting those people along your journey. And some of them will hopefully still be there for you. I had a wonderful mentor who did pass many years ago. But when you have those mentors, be grateful for them. When you have people who refer you, be grateful for that and nurture those relationships. I'm such a big believer in the value of building and nurturing relationships and connecting with people and letting them know that they're appreciated.
That is beautiful. So I'm going to ask you a leading question, especially after that. What's the most important thing in life?
Relationships.
I had a feeling.
Well, and a lot of times when I speak, I talk about that marketing is like life. It's building relationships. there are probably those people out there that want to be a hermit, that want to be alone. But I think we all thrive when we have, and I don't mean necessarily romantic relationships, they can be business relationships, they can be friendships, they can be family. But that to me is one of the most important things in life, is having those connections with people, people that you can laugh with and love with, and share highs with and share lows with, and they stick with you through, the good times and the bad. So live, laugh, and love.
Certainly, certainly. So when you're speaking or working with people in a one-on-one situation, and they're facing a decision point in life where they have to go one way or the other way, what's the advice that you give them?
Oh, it's a hard one, because the first thing that comes to mind is follow your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say it's hard is because sometimes it's hard, and it's been that way for me at times, hard to hear your heart's message. And I think some of the challenge in that could be the other little voices that are in your head. So you think, well, I should do this. Then, oh no, you should do this. I should start my own business. Oh, where are you going to get the money? You should go get a job. So it's a matter of trying to pay attention to your intuition. And then, another way to do it, or in addition, is to write down a list of pros and a list of cons. What are the pluses? What are the minuses? And then weigh that and see what comes up. But also pay attention to how you're feeling when you write those lists.
Mm-hmm.
When you're writing the positive side of it, is there a negative voice that keeps coming up and says, but this and this and this and this? Or is there a voice that's going, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, if you did this, then you could do that. So I'm always trying to be optimistic and positive and look at the bright side. But that doesn't mean for sure that this little voice doesn't come up and say, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that. So it's, it's not up to me to decide what works for somebody else, but it's always nice to have feedback from people.
Certainly.
To help you, to be supportive.
Absolutely. So how do you deal with that little voice when you've got the intuition and you've got the desire, but you keep hearing that little voice saying,
It's, thank you for sharing. So for me personally, thank you for sharing doesn't always work. It could be writing it, sitting and writing in a journal,
mm-hmm.
Or picking up the phone and hashing it out with somebody who I know is really supportive of me, who will help me look at the plus and the minus side, turning to a mentor or a colleague, and just finding someone who's supportive, and someone who's supportive that you really trust, can be really honest with you and say, here's what I think, and that voice that's talking to you, say thank you for sharing, but I think you should still go forward. And, it's not easy. I go through that every so often, just when I'm doing a proposal, let's say for a client or for a speaking engagement, or I get turned down, then the voice comes up and might say, you're not good enough. And then I have to say, oh, well, it's not that I'm not good enough. It just wasn't a fit. And so say thank you and move on to the next. Believe me, though, it's easier said than done. So
you're telling me that going from the speech therapist in this high school to a successful speaker and writer wasn't a simple, easy journey?
No, it was like this. It's a roller coaster ride, and it continues to be. There's still days I go, what do I want to be when I grow up? My nephew graduated college several years ago, and he wasn't sure, should he go on to law school? Should he go travel for a year? What should he be when he grows up? And I said, Aunt Debbie is still asking herself that question. So don't be so worried about it at 22 years old. And again, it's easier said than done. But life is a journey. So I'll probably, something else will probably shift in my life again before it's all over.
Sure. So if it's appropriate, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your journey so far?
Ooh, that's a good question. The biggest mistake I made, I'll have to give that some thought.
That's
Probably, I don't know if it's the biggest, but what comes up to mind first is undervaluing myself at times and, not asking for what I'm worth, probably early on. So let's go back to when I first started my business.
Sure.
Where I wasn't as focused yet and I had no clients. So I took on projects from anybody because they were going to pay the bills. But in hindsight, that probably was a mistake, and I have since shifted that. But, I might have lowered my fee for somebody, and then they became the hardest client to work for. Or I might have tried to convince somebody that I was the right fit for them just so I could get the project, and then realized, I really didn't, this really wasn't a fit. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes, is not being true to yourself and going, I'm going to do this because of the money, because I need to pay my bills. So
is part of it trying to balance the head and the heart?
Yes, it's a big mindset. It's a big mindset thing to go, one, for example, I've been at this now 29 and a half years. So I think I know what I'm doing. So if somebody says to me, I need a copywriter, but I only have $100 to write the content for 10 pages of my website, I'd like to be a nice person and say I could do that for you. But, $100 is not going to cover not just my time, but my years of experience in providing you with what you need the most. So I can refer you to somebody else if it's appropriate, or can you find more money in your budget, or maybe I do less work to fit your budget at a higher fee. But it took a long time to learn that. I remember real clearly, I got a phone call from somebody. You and I were talking about the mortgage business. I've written content for mortgage sites, and I've been a realtor. And I got a phone call from a gentleman who said, I need someone to write about reverse mortgages, and you were referred to me. I said, oh, awesome. He said to me, have you written about reverse mortgages? And I'm like, no, I've written a lot of content about the mortgage industry. I was a realtor, so I know about reverse mortgages. And he kept pushing how he wanted somebody who'd done specifically written about reverse mortgages. And I wasn't really feeling that connected to him on the phone. And I found myself trying to convince him I was his girl. And finally I went, you know what? I'm not connecting with him. Why am I trying to twist his arm and convince him I could do this project? And it was such a relief when I said to him, you know what? I guess I'm not the person for you. If I can find someone who can help you specifically with what you want, I will get you a name. And if you ever have a change of heart and want somebody to help you with mortgage content, please give me a call. And it was a relief to hang up the phone and go, you know what? Thank you, Debra, for doing that, because I probably saved myself a lot of grief, because I would probably be trying to prove to him repeatedly that I could do this instead of just saying, this doesn't feel like a fit. So if you're in a position in your own business and you feel like this isn't a fit, listen to that's, the mind and the heart. Listen to it and go, let me see if I can refer you to somebody who can help you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So have you ever fired a client?
I have, but the way I did it was slightly indirect.
Oh.
What I mean What I mean by that is I had a client who, bless his heart, I worked with him for several years, and I had made a special arrangement with him because he was going to give me a lot of work, and he did. But over time, it was time for me to raise my fees. And I was feeling like the partnership wasn't quite going in the direction I wanted. And in my gut, I thought if I raise my fees, he's going to say goodbye. So rather than me saying, I don't think we can work together anymore, I raised my fees.
And it worked.
And I justified it and explained to him what I was doing. And he said, okay, we're going to part ways. And actually, to this day, we are still in touch. He's now retired, so we're not doing any work together. But it was sort of, I guess, the polite way to sort of fire a client without saying, I can't work with you anymore. This is over. But I think it's important to acknowledge when you feel like you're in that situation and you do need to fire a client to find a nice way to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my way of doing it.
Very cool. I like that. Effective and very kind.
All right, it worked. Had he said, okay, I'll keep working with you with that fee, then it would have been worth my while. But I felt like I knew him well enough to know that's how it was going to turn out.
Certainly. Well, let's hit the rewind button for a minute and take you all the way back to college. As you're sitting in your classes and learning and then heading to graduate school, during that time, did you feel as if you had a passion for the direction of heading to be a speech
pathologist? Wow. So when I started college, I started out as a fine art major because I loved art, but I wasn't really an artist. I liked abstract art. I was one of those kids in high school that got an A for effort when it came to art. So I went into college as a fine arts major, but I wasn't a real big fan of art history.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a requirement when you're studying fine art. And again, I wasn't an artist. I wasn't, I like to draw and sketch and scribble. So I shifted direction and went into communications. And then I had to narrow that down. What kind of communications? The interesting thing about my journey is when I finished college, before I headed to graduate school, I took what was supposed to be a summer job in an advertising agency.
Ah.
So I wasn't writing marketing content then. This was just a summer job. I was floating, they called it, going from department to department, and ended up actually extending or postponing graduate school because I was having a good time doing this job. I, at that point, found a boss who was willing to help me maybe carve a career path in advertising.
Mm.
Going back to my parents, my father was a little disappointed. He's like, uh-oh, if you postpone graduate school, you're never going to go. But I did. 6 months later, I went and pursued my master's in speech pathology. And now here I am back many years later in the world of marketing and advertising. So maybe I should have stuck it out back then, but life has a way of doing its own thing.
Yeah, well, if you were given an opportunity to go whisper in the ear of that young lady in college, to give her some advice for the future, what would you tell her?
Yeah, I guess my advice to her is, go back and listen to your intuition. But back then, it wasn't like I was saying to myself, oh, I should stay in New York and pursue a career in advertising. I gave myself permission to postpone school and try something different, and decided, okay, I'm going to go to Colorado now. So there are actually kind of two sides to that coin. One is it took me to Colorado, which I love. I have left Colorado another time for 10 years, and I'll tell you about that shortly. So that path was a good thing for me. The career path changed, and I don't know, would the career path have changed if I stayed in New York? Hard to say.
Right.
I did leave for 10 years. I left Colorado in 2002 and was very blessed. Once again, I went to live on the island of Kauai in Hawaii.
Wow.
Um, so I was blessed, one, to go to Kauai, but two, to have my own business. So I was able to go because I could do my business. At that point, we had an internet, so I could do my business from anywhere. I also did my business as well as sold real estate. That's when I got into the real estate market. But back to my college days, when I wanted to go to grad school, my first choice for grad school was Hawaii. However, I wasn't accepted into the university there. So here, many years later, I end up back in, or not back in, I never went to Hawaii. I end up living in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
So you never know what path your life is going to take.
Certainly. So what brought you back to Colorado from Hawaii?
Some personal reasons, but one of the big things was Hawaii, as wonderful and gorgeous and beautiful as it is, was far from my family. So in 10 years of living there, I had one uncle and one cousin who came to visit me. And I came back to Colorado every year, and I went back to New York, where I'm from, to visit. My dad was alive at the time. My younger brother still lives there. So that was one reason. Also, another reason was, as a speaker, it's a little more challenging to travel from the island of Kauai.
That's true.
Than it is from Colorado. So I went back and forth from Colorado to Hawaii for 5.5 years before I moved there full time. And so now I'm doing the reverse again. Now I'm going from here and back there. I'm going in October to speak on the island of Kauai and on the island of Maui. So
nice. Very cool.
Yeah. I consider myself fairly fortunate. I call 3 places home: New York, Colorado, and Kauai. So
that's pretty.
If I had asked that young girl in college about that, she wouldn't have had any clue.
So if you were given the opportunity to give some advice to somebody who was facing either the decision of, I want to change my life, or something has happened and I need to change, what's the one piece of advice you would give them?
Take a deep breath and find a mentor and go for it. I was going to say don't be afraid, but you know what? It's hard not to be afraid. It's a big change in your life, but I really believe that if it's something that you want to do, to go for it. And not just go for it willy-nilly, but to build a support system around yourself, to do your homework, to research it, find out, is there a market for this, and charge forward.
Nice. Very, very nice. This has really been fun talking to you today. This is you've had a fun journey. I think that just from
well, to be really honest, it didn't always feel fun. So there were tears. There have been tears, but there's also been joy. So
right, but just from listening to you, it's very obvious you figured out how to work through the tears, and know that there's some joy coming after whatever bumps you're hitting.
Right.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. So if people wanted to know more about you or get in contact with you, what are the best ways to get a hold of you?
Oh, there's several ways. My website, if you're interested in copywriting, is rightdirection.com, and that's spelled W-R-I-T-E, rightdirection.com. If you're interested in speaking or hiring a speaker for an event, for a conference, for a training, that's debrajason.com. So DebraJason.com. And if you should be interested in my book, if you want an autograph copy, it's Millionaire Marketing on a Shoestringbudget.com. So ordering it from there gets you an autograph book with a gold shoestring, but you can also get it on Amazon.
Oh, very cool. Very
and
cool.
Then I'm just about all the social, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can find me on those avenues as well. So thank you for asking.
Certainly, and we'll make sure to put those on the website when I put this interview up. We'll have all of those links for everyone so that they can get a hold of you.
Awesome.
I always like to end with one question. And that question is, what question did I forget to ask you?
I think you fairly well covered it. Let's see. How about this? How much time do we have?
However much we need.
One question you could have asked me is, how did your book come about?
How did your book come about?
So the book came about, and one of the nice things about moving from Hawaii back to Colorado, because I don't know if it would have happened if I hadn't moved. Back in 2001, after 9/11, a lot of my clients started cutting back on their marketing, and they were calling me and they were afraid and they didn't want to spend any money. And my philosophy was, that's when you need to stay out there. That's when you need to keep marketing. So I started to guide them and coach them in cost-effective ways to market their business. In the course of speaking, I had colleagues who said, if you're speaking, you need a book.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I mentioned, I started a presentation after 9/11 called Millionaire Marketing on a Shoestring Budget. And someone heard that one day and they went, that sounds like a book.
It does.
So that's kind of how the book was born. I actually met a colleague of mine who had a publishing company who said, I'm interested in the title. And then I didn't do anything with it for about a year. I had another colleague who I had met years ago. I was president of the Rocky Mountain Direct Marketing Association. And this gentleman came to speak and he kept talking about how he wanted to live in Hawaii. And I said, oh, well, I live on Kauai. And he said, oh, can you get me some speaking gigs? So I actually did get him 2 gigs because he was coming to the island. Fast forward years later, I see on Facebook he's in Colorado, and now I'm back living in Colorado. And somehow the book idea came up, and he said, oh my God, I didn't know you had a book in you. I help people with that kind of thing. You helped me get those speaking gigs. Let me help you get that book out of here and onto paper. So that's how this was born. And now it's, in addition to being a 3-hour workshop, the book, I have other workshops that I do, but it was like birthing a baby. So that's could be a whole nother show, is about the idea of getting a book out of here and into your hands. But I don't know if I would have done it had I not moved back to Colorado.
You know what? You just highlighted when I asked you earlier, what was the most important thing in life? You said relationships. And it was that relationship that helped you get the book.
Yeah. There you go.
What a cool way to wrap this up by emphasizing your most important
thank
thing.
You.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for spending the time today. This has been a fun interview to learn about you and your journey. And I'm looking forward to seeing where the journey continues to take you. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me as your guest, and thank you to everyone who tunes in.